Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Point of Purchase, our first one of 2021. So good to have you back. Hope you're having a great start to the year. My name is Isaac Wanzama. I'm the founder and chief strategist at Geeks Commerce, an agency that focuses on helping our customers grow their business online. And I will be your host for today. If you're watching us live, as always, on Facebook or YouTube or otherwise, please leave us a comment if you want to participate in the conversation. We'll try to take up as many questions as we can during the course of the show. If you're joining us for the first time, Point of Purchase is a series we started last year to really help us share and engage with folks in retail and e-commerce, and really get conversation going around trends, best practices, and all things e-commerce. We certainly share our expertise as an agency who spends a lot of time working with folks in this area and our clients. But more importantly, we want to bring in, as we do always, experts in other domains, have them share their expertise as well. And today's topic is certainly no different from that. Today, we're going to be talking about diversification in e-commerce. The topic is Beyond Borders, exploring e-commerce opportunities in China and beyond for North American manufacturers. Certainly, it's a time of year where a lot of companies are starting to really think about how do I grow market opportunities? Where else could we begin to forge out? And with the valuation of nearly $1 trillion, the Chinese e-commerce market is certainly one that cannot be ignored. But the question is, how do I start? How do I begin to even think about exporting as an opportunity for my brand? What about regulations? What about partners? Those are all questions that we need to know and need to have answered before we begin to think about building our e-commerce strategy. Fortunately for us, we've got two great guests today who have breadth of expertise in this area, and hopefully they'll share their knowledge and help us navigate through some of these questions. First of all, I'd like to bring Peter McMath. Peter?
Hi, Isaac.
How are you?
Thank you. Good. Yeah, doing really well. Thank you.
Awesome. Peter is the VP of Business Development at WPIC, Marketing and Technologies. Peter is committed to leveraging his experience to support organizations seeking market entry in China and the Asia-Pacific regions overall. Next up, we have Kate Anderson from Alibaba Com.
Hi, Isaac. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Kate. Good to have you back.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. A little bit about Kate. Kate is the Director of Marketing at Alibaba.com North America. She's been working to build the Alibaba.com brand in North America since 2018 and is focused on making the marketplace an essential ally for small and mid-sized businesses. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Perfect. So as we always do on the show, we do like to give our guests an opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves and certainly about their organization. Peter, I'm going to start with you. Tell us your journey, and more importantly, tell us about WPIC and what you do for brands.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac, and pleased to be with everyone today. My background actually prior to WPIC was on the brand side, was involved with numerous consumer brands over the years, growing them, expanding them, not only here in North America, but internationally. I kind of ended that journey specifically growing brands in China, and which originally got me into the market. That's when I joined WPIC. WPIC, is really a full service technology, digital e-commerce company that helps organizations with all things market entry and growth into mainland China. The firm's been doing that for close to 2 decades now, and we've supported close to 500 brands to date with their entry and growth in the market.
And that's fantastic. So we're hoping to have a lot of that knowledge and experience there on this conversation as we share entry into the market. Kate, I'm going to turn over to you. Obviously, we know who Alibaba is, but tell us your story a little bit and some of the exciting things that your team is doing.
So my background, I really have had various roles at B2B SaaS companies, and particularly in international marketing. So I've been with Alibaba.com going on 2.5 years now. And it's really interesting, the .com, I'm sure Peter will get into some of the different business units that we have at Alibaba Group. The .com is actually the oldest business unit, Jack Ma's original vision to make B2B sales easier online. And so I've really been focused on that in the US and getting small businesses on the platform to both tap into our global demand by selling and also sourcing internationally.
And that's really exciting. I know that Alibaba has taken quite a number of different steps to help, manufacturers in the U.S. particularly diversify globally. So that's a lot of what we're hoping to hear today. So let's dive into this. And before we do, just a reminder, if you do have questions for Peter or Kate, who are here to share their knowledge, please leave them in the comments and we'll take them up certainly before the show is over. With that, let's dig into the market size that is the Chinese market. I said off the top that we're looking at $1 trillion for China and over $2 trillion once you put in the Asia Pacific market. More importantly, it's a very technologically savvy market with more than 50% of people in China on mobile. Peter, what are your thoughts on the size of this market, and really what are the key differences, if any, between China and Asia Pacific and North America?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in today's environment, most organizations and brands are obviously familiar with the banner headlines that happen in China around this total size of the market there. The sheer volume of consumer buying power is pretty staggering and ever growing. When we look at last year's 2020 11/11 report from Alibaba, we're looking at over $100 billion in GMV transacted in that festival alone, right? And so this is a massive opportunity for brands to take advantage of. I think some of the unique components that some organizations aren't familiar with is really the consolidation of consumer spending within China and some of the key marketplaces and ecosystems where really the demand is occurring and conversion is happening. Here in North America, I think there's good diversification of that. In China, things are very streamlined with a couple of key players in the market. And so brands need to be aware of those dynamics and prepared to support that accordingly.
Absolutely. And I think there's some very interesting dynamics that, as you said, you need to be aware of as you begin to think about internationalization. Kate, I'm gonna let you add on to that. How's Alibaba enabling some of this to happen?
So our motto is really making it easier to do business anywhere. So specifically on the B2B side, I think B2B, particularly smaller B2Bs, have been very traditional in their sales and marketing strategies, very analog, going to trade shows, seeing people in person, paper invoices, that sort of thing, shaking hands. And what our platform does is enables these small businesses to get online to both diversify their supply chain, meet new suppliers, and do business with them wherever in the world they might be, as well as meet new customers wherever they are. So sort of lowering those barriers to entry and enabling small and medium-sized businesses to act like a multinational corporation.
Also, and I know that was something that was quite key in 2020 as the word was pivot. Everybody was pivoting, and certainly, as you correctly raised, these small, manufacturers or mid-size that have done certainly things one way, certainly found they had to do that. How did Alibaba, support some of those efforts?
So the pandemic obviously forced a lot of businesses to go online, through duress, really, to grow their businesses, to find new channels, to find new customers, to find new sales. So we kind of already had the infrastructure in place to help businesses do that. And we introduced a few initiatives over the course of last year, sort of to help small businesses get online. So the digitization sprint for US manufacturers that GeekSpeak was a part of, to sort of help US manufacturers, again, traditionally very offline, to help them consider e-commerce, storefronts, and meeting new customers and growing their sales online.
On there, no, absolutely. And I think it was a fantastic effort. So, Peter, let's dig into the consumer, culture understanding, buyers as brands are beginning to look into China specifically. What are the most key drivers that Chinese consumers online, kind of bring forward that maybe different in North America, and more importantly, how can we as brands out here begin to leverage some of these drivers?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities between consumer behavior in China and consumer behavior here in North America and in the West at large. Ultimately, consumers want brands that are engaged. They want to be heard, right? and they want their feedback to be listened to. And so in China, it's a very different landscape in terms of the platforms, the tactics that are being executed to ultimately deliver that engagement. But fundamentally, the premise is the same. And so I think the unique aspect for an organization looking to ultimately reach consumers in China is to become fundamentally aware of these ecosystems and these channels that are going to be most effective, whether it's in the e-commerce ecosystems or broader social or just the general internet at large. There's a lot of opportunities for brands to not only build awareness, to educate, but to ultimately engage with their consumers. And that's so fundamental in the China market. Consumers there are extremely savvy. And so for brands to take, a really engaged approach, a really direct approach in the market, due to how large and significant this market is, it really requires brands, to be, 100% in on the market and aware of what actions they're taking.
Absolutely, and I think I'll follow up on that. I think that understanding that engagement and beginning to actually achieve it, I think for brands you have to understand, and you touched on this, the ecosystem. Who is who? So we've got the WeChats, we got Pinduoduo, we got Tencent, we got Alibaba. How do all these different players contribute to just beginning to build your strategy properly?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Some of the Alibaba is obviously the primary player within this ecosystem. I think a lot of people look at this as like the Amazon of China. That couldn't be farther from the truth. It's far more than just a point of sale. It's an opportunity for brands to develop content, to engage with influencers, to build out loyalty programming, both on the buy side and the sell side. And so, when we look at the Alibaba ecosystem, this is a very deep, opportunity for brands to take advantage of all the various components and business units that are available. Specifically on the consumer front, Tmall dominates the marketplaces, from a consumer spending perspective. Outside of that ecosystem, there's certainly the social platforms that are very relevant, whether it's WeChat, like you mentioned, Weibo, Douyin. There's a lot of opportunities for brands to start to take advantage of all the various ecosystems that exist in China to drive their brand awareness and engagement, and then ultimately use the marketplaces that have become so established here to drive conversion and revenue growth.
And Kate, I'll bring you in here. I don't know if you want to add to that.
So Peter, thank you very much for mentioning that Alibaba is not the Amazon of China. That's definitely something that we incorporate into our messaging. We're really here on the B2B side to help folks expand digitally and expand globally and find new customers wherever they are. So we have U.S. businesses on the platform selling to customers all over the world. B2B though, so it's not as close to the end consumer as some of the ecosystem members that you mentioned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm with you with that, Kate. And I think, Peter, your point is the fact that understanding landscape also points in some ways understanding the culture of the consumer itself. So we see this convergence between social and e-commerce, which is something quite unique given the platforms that exist there. We see presence of streaming as a way to actually bring product out. How are those innovative approaches helping brands succeed in those markets?
Yeah, live streaming's taken off. At WPIC in the last 12 months, we've invested heavily in infrastructure. Like, we now own, I think, 6 live stream studios in mainland China to support brands with infrastructure in the ground to allow them to take advantage of that tactic. When you look at a platform like Alibaba and inside of the marketplaces there, like Tmall, they've fundamentally built out those channels to allow consumers to educate and engage and develop really engaging content for consumers directly in the point of sale. This has become a massive industry within its own right. Here in North America, everyone's familiar with like the Instagram influencer scene, TikTok. In China, they've been way ahead of the curve when it comes to this type of funnel development. and brand engagement with influencers and using, live stream content as the primary medium. In terms of overall size and scale, it could be compared to like the QVC here in North America in terms of that level of success, in terms of the numbers it drives. And so it's a very effective channel. I mean, brands certainly want to go in prepared, understanding, the types of channels, the types of influencers they want to engage with. But ultimately, this is, a really, really effective medium for brands to be able to speak to Chinese consumers in their local language, and ultimately, bring that authenticity to the table.
And so you mentioned the infrastructure that your firm has built to enable some of this. Walk us through some of the mechanics for our viewers who have never actually seen a stream and how that turns into a product purchase or conversion. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah, I mean, similar to a live stream like we're doing today, in China, there's an ability to, click to purchase directly on the feed. And so it really brings, that funnel, in a really tight ecosystem, right? Without having to go from platform to platform. Alibaba's enabled brands to do this, directly within the ecosystem. And so that's really empowering for a brand to be able to bring really engaging content to the forefront directly within their point of sale, be able to take advantage of the 750 million monthly active users that exist already in the marketplace and convert them. And so brands that are able to effectively deploy and localize their content for the market can definitely take advantage of this system that ultimately Alibaba has enabled foreign brands to deliver on.
No, I've seen some of those streams and they're really, really cool. Kate, I'm going to bring you in there. Really, some innovative ideas happening in the market. Any thoughts or possibilities of some of these coming and bridging themselves into North America?
Yeah, I think there's so much to learn from our Chinese colleagues and sort of what the success that they've seen in e-commerce reaching Chinese consumers. So for instance, the live stream is a great example. And we actually started doing that. We instituted online trade shows here in the US, where we're featuring our US-based sellers in particular categories that there's a lot of demand for made in the USA products. So for instance, food and beverage, a lot of demand for US made products in that category. We had an online trade show inviting our US sellers in that category to sort of do the QVC live stream demo of their products and get them in front of buyers and get those inquiries in. So that's sort of a learning we took from the overall Alibaba ecosystem and brought it to US B2B market.
No, fantastic. That's good to hear. Peter, we're going to come back to you here just to talk a little bit about entry strategy here. We've touched on the size of the market. I'm just going to throw another stat here. Grew by 44% between 2014 and 2020. Massive growth compared to about 14% for the US in the same period of time. Now, I'm putting on my CEO hat, whether I'm in the US or I'm in Canada. I'm really thinking about what my entry is here. At the start, how do I get started? Do I start this journey here in North America? Do I need to find a partner down there to get started, or perhaps work with a third party, company like a WPIC?
Yeah. So typically when we're talking to brands and organizations that are looking to enter China for the first time, our recommendation is always to start with the right strategy, and be able to pull enough data and insights to start to make the tactical decisions that you ultimately need to execute for success within your product vertical, your competitive set. And so I think, inside of China, there's a lot of data available, much more so that's typically available than here in the North America, for brands to really help start to make some of these decisions about what are the most appropriate channels, what type of resources they're going to need to invest, what is an appropriate revenue target, what's the size of the prize, what does success look like in this market, and what are we going to need to execute at a tactical level to be able to achieve that success. So our approach in supporting organizations here in the West that don't have Chinese speaking staff, they don't have a Chinese entity, they don't have any infrastructure on the ground, they really need to be armed with as much data and insights as possible here in the West prior to making those decisions. I think long are the days of brands going into a new market, getting a distributor and calling it a day. The marketplaces are just so hyper competitive now that it really requires full engagement across every business function. So whether that's at the C-suite, the marketing team, the operations team, logistics, brands really need to be aware of what they're getting into. And you know, at the end of the day, you know, the size of the prize is typically worth it, right? This is one of the fastest growing consumer markets globally. And so our approach is really to service organizations with data first to help guide the right decisions so that they can start to select the appropriate channels, partners, third parties, or if they want to take it in-house, be really aware of what it's going to take for them to ultimately execute that.
On there, and I'd argue, Kate, is probably the same, you know, thinking or question I have to answer, whether it's going into China or any other global market. What are you telling brands who want to use Alibaba as a platform to jump into other parts of the world?
So I think it's all about, you know, the built-in traffic and the built-in demand that we have on the platform. It's 20 years of having this website up with active buyers from all over the world. So we have around 26 million active buyers on the platform, and these are folks that aren't just browsing, they're actually sending messages to suppliers and sending inquiries about their products, and they're spread out. These buyers are spread out in 190 different regions of the world. So, you know, it's a good way to, you know, tap into that demand without going through the steps of setting up your own e-commerce site and trying to target traffic and drive traffic to that site. So sort of easier to plug into.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that e-commerce certainly, you know, facilitates that, you know, quick entry into market. Let's get into categories a little bit here. Peter, you mentioned off the top that, you know, you folks have worked with 500 plus brands. Are there categories that just works better from an internationalization standpoint? Some that you've said, you know what, maybe, you know, going into China or the Asia Pacific is probably not a good idea at this point.
Yeah, look, I think there's massive growth across the board at e-commerce at large. When we dive into specific categories that are you know, extremely fast growing today,
right,
a lot of that's obviously driven from a post-COVID environment. And so, you know, when we look at categories like health and wellness, you know, huge triple-digit growth, you know, over the last 12 months. When we look at food and beverage, right, the desire for, you know, good for you, good for your body, good for your family is top of mind at a consumer level. You know, when we look broadly to, you know, outdoor and sporting goods, right, to promote physical activity, these are all things that are really fast growing, and you know, driving some pretty significant numbers. On top of that, you know, obviously, you know, I think that the general trajectory of the cosmetics and personal care categories have been staggering. That continues to kind of be driven at those peak levels. We don't see that slowing down anytime soon. These are all products that become very personal to the buyer, and so there's huge demand for really high quality products, you know, from you know, global organizations and outstanding brands.
And Kate, I'll let you add in. Obviously, this is the digital sprint was about to, you know, bring in manufacturers. Are there categories that you've just seen succeed versus others?
Yeah, just to echo what Peter said, on our side, we've seen a lot of demand for particular categories that are manufactured in the US, from a global audience, being food and beverage, one of them, health and wellness, supplements, nutrition, and health and beauty, cosmetics. We actually had online trade shows in those three specific categories late last year to help sellers in those categories kind of match with the global demand. So, you know, the consumer is at the end of the value chain, and, you know, further up the value chain, the B2Bs are transacting in those categories as well.
On focus, and that's definitely good to know. And with that, let's get into, just to continue the conversation around entry. I'm assessing which market to go to. Let's talk about risk a little bit here. You know, Peter, in working with brands, how are you addressing issues and concerns around IP? How has the regulatory environment changed that we should need to know?
Yeah, you know, I think fundamentally, you know, there's certainly in the broader general public, some myths around, getting ripped off in China, for example.
Right.
I think the contrary is actually the truth, in that the IP protection laws in China are extremely well established. Being a first to file market and having ownership over your trademarks in the market empowers a brand to really control all aspects of what's being transacted in that market. Alibaba's done an outstanding job of protecting brands, protecting trademark owners from counterfeit product and unauthorized transactions. And so there's a lot of infrastructure in place to support brands. Certainly a number of complexities around the regulatory and compliance that brands need to be intimately aware of. But again, I think Alibaba's investments in infrastructure from a cross-border e-commerce perspective has supported a lot of these industries to be able to access the China market efficiently with IP protection in place. Platforms like Tmall Global do an outstanding job of really being able to take, let's say, a cosmetics brand that does an animal test, right, and never will. That product won't meet domestic Chinese regulations, but Alibaba's enabled that brand to access Chinese consumers through cross-border e-commerce, staying true to their brand ethos, being able to offer that authentic product that they want to deliver to consumers in that market. And so, and on top of that, giving them the IP protection that their store is the authorized store for that particular trademark, and no other merchant can transact under that particular set of IP. And so a lot of the fundamental infrastructure is there to support brands in this market. And Alibaba's been at the center of enabling that.
No, fantastic, Kate. I'll let you add to that. Obviously, being able to protect my product and my idea on the marketplace is critical to anybody who wants to enter a new market. Maybe you could comment on Alibaba's direction there.
Yeah, I can't speak to some of the larger regulatory and IP issues, but I can speak to some of the built-in features on the platform
Right.
that are made to protect both the buyer and the seller. Some of those being verified suppliers, so you can look for suppliers that have met certain criteria when you're transacting. Things like real-time translation to enable better communication between buyer and seller and better understanding. And we do have payment protection built into the platform to ensure that what you order is what you get, and there is recourse if that doesn't happen.
Right.
So I think that goes a long way to helping these global buyers and global sellers transact online in different markets.
Fantastic. And I think that's going to go a long way in giving companies the confidence to use your platform or even enter the market overall. So on that note, Peter, I'll come back to you. We talk obviously to our customers about the importance of having multi-channel redundancy in their approach to markets. When we are considering entering China, thoughts around: do we partner with somebody? Do we launch our own site? Is a marketplace strategy the only way to go? How does this mix play out for some of your brands?
Yeah, when we look at the broader ecosystem, China is very marketplace driven, right? A couple of key marketplaces, are gonna represent the majority of purchases and your primary points of sale in that market. Unlike here in North America, where your own brand.com site is going to be a really significant driver from a D2C level, and a marketplace like Amazon or Walmart might be more secondary to that. In China, the opposite is true. Brand.cn sites represent very few transactions, and the marketplaces have really risen to really dominating the share of consumer spending. When we look at diversification of channel, what we really suggest is diversification of traffic and diversification of brand awareness, and being able to really take charge and control of your brand, really owning that position, and being able to engage consumers across all the various ecosystems that exist. Well, the point of sale and the ultimate conversion is likely going to happen in a couple of key marketplaces within Alibaba, for example. There's lots of opportunities for brands to engage consumers outside of that ecosystem and really start to take charge of their brand.
No, that's fantastic. And to talk about sort of the environment we live in, and certainly diversifying has a lot been driven by what's happening globally. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19. Kate, looking at where you were 2020 in terms of your predictions and where things were as far as e-commerce goes, is this what you expected? Have your predictions changed?
I think, we predicted that we actually ran a survey to 5,000 US SMBs at the end of 2019. And, there was trends towards digitization. And actually, I think it went even faster and accelerated due to COVID. And then when we reran the survey 6 months into COVID, we did find that more of these B2B businesses were adopting digital channels at a much faster rate than we expected based on the results of the 2019 survey. So I think our predictions were directionally correct. So we just didn't expect the acceleration that we saw.
Understood. And Peter, I'm going to bring you in there. Obviously, the lockdowns, a lot of them happened early in China than they did around the world. What has the impact been on the e-commerce market in that region overall?
We've seen certainly, a mass exodus from traditional brick and mortar like we did here. What that's given rise to is massive growth within the e-commerce channels. Overall, our portfolio in aggregate is probably up 207% over last year, which is staggering, right? And obviously a lot of that touches on some of those hyper growth categories, right, that are up even further than that. But we've seen that shift fundamentally take place. It's continuing to grow. We don't see signs of that slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think if anything, 2021 is going to be maybe 2 or 3 times the size of what we saw in 2020. So this all sounds like really great opportunities for brands who are thinking about this. Let's talk about how to get started and what some of the supports are. Kate, Alibaba has quite a bit. Maybe we'll start with you and tell us a little bit about that.
I suggest businesses check out Alibaba.com/buildup. This is sort of a curated resource center for small businesses looking to go digital, go online. There's tons of information about the benefits, case studies, success stories of folks that have done it. So I recommend people visit that site versus the main site, which is the e-commerce site. So Alibaba.com/buildup.
Fantastic. And Peter, I'll ask you the same thing in terms of supports that are available on both sides of the border, perhaps in North America, Canada, but also perhaps in China.
Yeah, we're proud to be part of Alibaba's outstanding partner ecosystem. We've certainly been a long-standing partner with their various business units, on both sides of the ocean here. And so, yeah, there's many partners that are available that have deep expertise in all aspects of both go-to-market and ultimately, driving growth globally. And so, the platforms themselves have a huge amount of resources, and then there's a really great partner community to support organizations with activation, implementation, and ultimately growth.
Sure, fantastic. And we'll be sure before the end of this episode to get your information so our folks who reach out to you. And just before we wrap here, a bit of a fun questions to you both. Kate, I'm going to go back to you. What was the last thing you bought online, and what was that experience like?
I finally got my home office set up, and I purchased a desk chair online, and it went really well. I purchased from Wayfair, and I was able to filter down to find one that I really liked. And the most important thing is I got it and I was able to assemble it.
Fantastic. I was happy to hear a great experience. And Peter, the same thing with you. What was the last thing you bought, and how was that experience like for you?
Yeah, the last thing I bought was an avalanche transceiver to go skiing out in the backcountry. We're trying to avoid the crowds at the resorts for COVID, so safety first.
No, fantastic. Well, I want to thank you both for what has been an amazing session. This is an area of interest for a lot of companies, as I said off the top, who realize that there's opportunities beyond North America, whether it's in Europe, but certainly today the conversation was in China. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
For those who are watching, thanks again for watching Point of Purchase. I think this has been a very useful session as always is. Please do follow us on social so you find out about the next one. And certainly, we'll let you know when that is. Before we go, I want to ask you both, how do our viewers get a hold of you? Peter, I'll start with you.
Yeah, feel free to email me directly, peter.mcmath@wpic.co, and we'll be happy to discuss.
Fantastic. And Kate, I know you gave something already, but how do we find you?
I would recommend visiting my LinkedIn profile and send me a note and an invitation, and we can connect.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Again, thank you for watching Point of Purchase. If you do want to find more about us, please visit geekspeakcommerce.com and have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.